everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. I'm Dr. Kelly, OMD, your board certified OBGYN and healthcare executive, here to help you live your healthiest and wealthiest life. And the way that we do that is through our program called Viva Life SPF-Me. Viva means live and life LIFE. But I want you to be aware of the 5 pillars: spiritual, physical, financial, mental, and emotional. And that is where we help you not just survive, but thrive. I'm so happy to have Heather Horton here with us, talking us about not just grief, but how to empower us, give us resources and tools so that we can navigate grief and come out better on the other side. Heather, tell us a little bit about yourself and the top 3 things you want us to take away this evening.
Thank you, Dr. Kellyo, and thank you all for attending tonight. I am the Life and Joy Catalyst, and I help professional women who are struggling with grief, identity, and belonging to turn their pain into power and to reclaim abundant life and joy, which is your birthright. The top 3 things I want to share with you are that grief is about more than just physical death. Moving with and through grief is about a heart change, not a mind change. And grief affects living relationships just as much, if not more, than those who have died.
Well, we cannot wait to dive in. The reason why is because, as you all know, and as we put on our information, I am definitely going through these different stages. Definitely have had people pass away in the recent, last month, as well as over the last 6 months. And I'm so happy that this aligned at the right time. And you all know divine timing and divine alignment is all about what we talk about in Viva Life. So Heather, go ahead, take it away and let us know how we can truly thrive, not just survive this experience.
Thank you, Dr. Kelly. I want to just talk about 10 simple truths about grief. We'll start there. And one of the things I like to do is start with the definition of things, because we're socialized to believe that things mean one thing. But if you look in Webster's dictionary, there's at least 2 or 3 definitions of a word. So I think it's important to start off with what grief is. Grief is the normal and natural reaction to loss, change, or transition of any kind. That's probably the first time you've heard that. It's more than just physical death. And it involves a broken heart, not a broken brain. A lot of people, as soon as something happens, they're like, my heart's broken. They don't say their head's broken. So this is about a heart change. Grief is the conflicting feelings caused by the end of or the change in any familiar pattern of behavior. It's also the feeling of reaching out for someone who has always been there, only to discover when you need them one more time, they are no longer there. Grief is the feeling of reaching out for someone who has never been there, only to discover that when you need them one more time, they are still not there. Death is only one life experience that produces grief. And I want to put an adjective on that: physical death, not just death, because there are emotional deaths too that we'll talk about. There are over 43 life experiences that produce grief, including divorce, breakups, retirement, moving, pet loss, financial changes, increases and decreases, changes in health, legal problems, empty nesters, and the end of an addiction, graduations, and even all forms of abuse. Grief also involves intangible losses, things we can't touch, like loss of trust, loss of safety, loss of control, loss of faith, and loss of fertility. Another thing I want to talk about where grief shows up, where we don't typically think about it, is in organizational change, which a lot of us are experiencing that right now. And there's 6 types of grief to consider when there's organizational change. And some of these can relate to your personal life as well. Loss of control, loss of pride, loss of narrative, loss of time, loss of competence, and loss of familiarity. There are no stages of grief. I know you hear that all the time, but there are no stages of grief. Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross was the person that actually came up with the stages of grief, but that is about the stages that a person goes through when they are diagnosed with a terminal illness. So it's about dying. It is not about the things we should go through when, a death occurs in our life, be it physical or emotional. So I'm sure that is a different thought for a lot of you on the call. So what you do is you find yourself trying to fit yourself into bargaining or depression or denial, and it doesn't go in the in order. Doesn't go in order. One may happen, one may not happen, and then you find yourself in another grief situation. Grief is often misdiagnosed as ADHD, depression, or PTSD. Those are different things. Grief, again, is about a heart change. It is not about something going on with your brain. Misdiagnosis equals mistreatment. I'm going to say that again. Misdiagnosis equals mistreatment. And I know that you can probably second that, Dr. Kelly. Misdiagnosis is mistreatment. And a large percentage of people are on antidepressants and they're experiencing unresolved grief from prior losses in their lives rather than, which also like masks their feelings. Antidepressants can actually mask your feelings. Many people attempt to cover or avoid their feelings through what we call at the Grief Recovery Institute, STIRBs. STIRBs are short-term energy relieving behaviors. They are things that we do in and of themselves that are not harmful, but when we do them in excess, they can take over our lives, like alcohol, food, retail therapy. We can even exercise too much. We can overdo it on sex or the internet or social media. Again, none of those things are bad in and of themselves, but when they are done in excess or done not to feel, then it's time for us to actually realize that we may be grieving. This last truth about grief that I want to share is incomplete relationships create unresolved grief, and unresolved grief creates incomplete relationships. It's all about undelivered communications. You got to say the things that you're feeling in order for you to be able to move through that grief. There's also 6 things that paralyze us. And what I call them is, these are 6 myths about grief, but I'm going to tell you the truths about them too. The 6 myths about grief are: don't feel bad, replace the loss, grieve alone, just give it time, be strong or be strong for others, and keep busy. Those are the myths. Those are not true. These are the things you hear people say, but those are not the things that we're to do. The truth about don't feel bad is you avoid feeling at all. We are built, God built us to feel our feelings. And so when you hear don't feel bad, the natural instinct is to not feel at all. Replace the loss. That's the second myth. Well, if you're trying to replace the loss, there's no self-reflection. You fail to acknowledge the loss. You're just putting something else in the place of what was there and not really processing what happened. Because it's important to process what you lost and what you gain from what you lost. And I'm saying loss, and at the same time, I'm thinking this is a sidebar. Lost, L-O-S-T versus loss, L-O-S-S. A lot of times, and I'm going to say this now before I forget it, a lot of times we focus on, I lost this person, or I lost this thing with the T, L-O-S-T. However, you suffered a loss, LOSS. You have not really lost, LOST, anything, because grief is about the love you had for the person, the thing, or the situation. So it's not lost, LOST, it's still with you. Now you have to intentionally use it in some other way. Take what that thing, person, or situation gave you and continue the legacy of it and help and use it to create your own legacy. It's not lost, LOSS. And I'll give you an example. I'll just use the typical example of grief, death, physical death. And in my case, I can't say I lost my mother. What I can say is there was a loss, a death, a physical death of my mother. However, everything that she poured into me continues with me, and I now use it here and in my business to carry on her legacy and build my own. So there's no lost, LOST. It's just a loss, LOSS. The third myth is grieve alone. Grief actually throws us into isolation. And the truth is, we intentionally isolate when we are grieving. Maybe unknowingly, because it's probably the way we've been taught. Even as a child, when you've done something that you shouldn't have, you're told to go to your room. So that's where the cycle starts. Grief is about community. The fourth myth is time heals all wounds, or it just takes time. You hear that all the time. But time without action does nothing. And I'll give you my example from my own life. It took me probably 11 years to really talk about how my mother died and what happened, because I didn't want anybody to know. And I thought there was shame attached to it. And so I just didn't talk about it. But that didn't mean it went away. It still was there, and it would still rear its ugly head until I talked about it. So if you try to put things on the back burner, wait 20, 30 years to deal with it, trust me, it's still right there waiting for you. And it's probably fully grown and musty and all kinds of things. And it can overtake your life. The fifth myth is be strong, or be strong for others. The truth is, you're not wearing your oxygen mask. And that happens a lot. And we hear that on planes. Put your oxygen mask on first before you help someone else. And being strong is how a lot of professional women have moved through life. There is no glory in being strong. It has its place. The last myth is keep busy. The truth is, you're not living. You're just existing. If you're just keeping busy. Grief impacts also our identity in three particular ways. Because with grief requires a lot of self-reflection in order to actually move with and through it. And notice I'm not saying you get over it. You move with and through it. The three ways that identity impacts us is self-acceptance, self-compassion, and self-worth. And it's not self-acceptance, it's self-awareness. When I said that, I was like, that's not right. Self-awareness, self-compassion, and self-worth. Self-awareness is, do I know my values? Am I taking action that's aligned with my values? What are my non-negotiables? If you don't take an opportunity to think about those things, when change, loss, and transition, which are the ways grief shows up, if that comes comes about, then you don't have a starting point to move back from hopelessness back to hope, because we start with hope. We always have hope, but our situations that come in our lives take us into hopelessness. But there are ways we can get back to that hope through self-reflection or self-awareness. Self-compassion, loving yourself, giving yourself rest, knowing how to emotionally regulate. And when I say emotionally regulate, I mean it's different from emotional intelligence. Emotional regulation is knowing exactly what to do and doing that thing in the moment when you need it. Not just having a body of knowledge of emotional intelligence. That's not going to help you in the moment. You need to know how to emotionally regulate. Um, Give yourself permission to grieve. That's what self-compassion is, because we were created to emote. God created us to emote, but a lot of times we don't like tears. Tears are a miracle that leads to healing. And I dare you, the next time you cry, check out whether the tears are hurting or not. If they're hurting, that's toxicity coming out of your body. If it's just tears and they're flowing, those are happy tears and you are actually alive. If you're not crying, that's when you need to worry. You don't need to worry about crying, but not crying. Mm-hmm. And lastly, self-worth. That's about belonging. Not comparing yourself, not saying I should be. Who says you should? God orders your steps. You are where you're supposed to be. How are we doing on time, Dr. Kelly?
We're doing great on time. Thank you so much. I know you said that was your last, but I was like, I'm so into it. I'm like, more. But no, first of all, you have opened my aperture, right? Because of course, in medicine, it's always there's a diagnosis, there's stages of this diagnosis, this is the treatment, and this is what we do. So having you talk about grief, I think people put grief into stages, so that's an easy way for people to figure out, you know, where am I and when am I going to be done, right? But as you said, you can go through different phases of the experience and the different emotions depending on what actions that you're actually taking associated with those emotions. So thank you so much. Now, Viva Lifers and guests, you can go ahead and start putting questions in the chat for us. I'm going to start us off, but you can start putting questions in the chat if you have any questions for us. And so let's just, really talk about some of the things you broke down, because there was a lot. There was the first 10, there's the 6, and then the second 6, right? So I love the fact that you talked about grief is not just about death. And I know when I introduced this, I did talk about death, but then you mentioned retirement, which I just retired. It's 8 months ago, 7 months ago. I don't even know how many months ago now, right? And it's like there's a major change. And with that comes financial change, as well as, like you said, relationship changes. We're so used to being a part of community and showing up at work a certain time of the day and having all these people around, which completely changes. So if you could just expand upon the fact that, or talk about the fact that grief is not only associated with death, but is a death of something, someone, or some experience, I guess that would be helpful for us as well.
Yeah, I just go back to, it's about change, loss, and transition. Anything that's different from what it was yesterday or in the last minute, we need to take time to actually reflect on what changed, what did I lose, and what did I gain? Which is usually the thing, like people will immediately say, well, I didn't gain anything. However, pausing, which when they say they haven't gained anything, that is a reaction. When you take that pause, you're able to respond because you've had 90 seconds or so to really think about all the things that may have happened, or the one thing that you forgot about that you actually did gain from a loss. And I'll give you an example. In the last probably 6 or 7 years, when I actually started my business and actually started talking about grief, I actually felt like I was living my best life. And I couldn't believe I was saying that. And my mother was not in my life physically. How can I say those two things and they make sense? But I can, because I looked at all the things that she poured into me, all the things I've been able to do because of the foundation that she gave me, how I just my foundation with my relationship with God as is all because of where she started me. So I'm living my best life because of the love she poured into me and the legacy that I'm continuing through her and through my own life.
Thank you so much for that. And thank you for that response. So we have two questions starting us off. So first question is, can you talk about the impact if you don't deal with a grief event as it occurs?
That is a great question. If you don't deal with a grief event as it occurs, then when the next one happens, you're dealing with that one and all the other ones that you didn't deal with.
Mm.
Um, what we don't realize is if we don't actually take the time to reflect and again figure out what we lost or what was lost, what was um, gained, and how do we want to move forward to continue our legacy and maybe the legacy of the thing that is no longer present. um, we do ourselves a disadvantage that pain stays in the body, can cause disease, um, a number of things. It's dominoes. It's a domino effect if you don't deal with each one. And interestingly enough, when I'm a grief recovery method specialist, and when I went through the Grief Recovery Institute, it was like I released almost 40 years of something, and now it gives me the ability to be able to take one event, do some self reflection, and move forward. I know not to actually allow things to accumulate because then I've got to remove myself from life and take a breather and really do a lot of self-reflection. So if you're able to take each thing and I don't want to say analyze it, but that's what you're doing. You're actually looking at the pros and cons and what's your takeaways. um yeah, you're setting yourself up for failure.
And I'm glad you brought up the physical side effects of grief, right? So, of course, I'm going to always think about the internalization of not um, managing, dealing with, acknowledging, self reflecting on anything that causes you um, lack of peace is going to turn into, like you said, it's going to turn into cancer. It's going to turn into hypertension. It's going to turn into diabetes, weight loss, and it may just kill you. It may just kill you sooner than you would have had you actually um, gone through steps so that you can thrive after the event actually happened. So I think that's really important. And that's one of the things that we try to put together with Viva Life. You know, me being a physician and then also the psychology, the mental, the emotional um, things that happen in disease processes. The root causes truly begin many times with events that happen in our lives. It's not just genetic. So thank you for that and that explanation. So how do you learn to grieve when your environment has never allowed the same or demonstrate how to?
Hmm. You've got to be a pioneer and decide for yourself that you want something different and be intentional about it. Even if you have to set up boundaries to block out everyone in your life, you have to make a choice because you only get one life. God has given you time on earth and a life to live and a purpose in that life. And he's not going to um, the excuses are not going to fly when you share them with him. And so if you are serious about changing your life, you've got to make that intentional choice. And I'm here to help you with that. Because I'll be sharing my contact information
Yeah,
later.
absolutely. So when there's a lot of things that we were never allowed to do and we there weren't demonstrated, right? So I didn't have, for example, my father passed away when I was 4 years old. I didn't have a father in my home for my entire lifetime. My son has that. I
Mm.
absolutely do not know how to best interact with my husband who's actually here. Like I understand how to raise a child as a single mother. I don't know how to raise a child as a wife, a co-parent. But just because I hadn't seen it doesn't mean that we don't have the resources and tools to be able to do it. And I love the way what you said about being a pioneer and saying, you know what, I'm going to break this, people say a lot generational curse. It may not be generational, but I'm going to break this pattern because I deserve the absolute very best. In Viva Life, we talk about forgiveness and release a lot. And I do believe that grief is about that. Looking at it, reflecting on it, and saying, you know what? I'm going to let this go to its highest and best good so that I can receive what is for my highest and best good. And that is really, what we're talking about here when we talk about you're letting go. You're letting go so that you can open up space so that you can have joy, happiness, and peace. And that is truly what we are on this earth to be able to do, in my belief, and I believe in so many of what you said as well. Let's see. We have another question. I'm suffering grief right now for a long-term relationship of 14 years, and I'm asking myself all of those questions. What did I gain? What did I lose? Was it the right decision at the right time? Lots of feelings. Any comments on that?
Well, one thing that I'm thinking of that has come to light is what's the root of the grief? Because it may not be that relationship.
Mm,
Have to go back even further. Um, for example, I'll give you an example. I have or had a lot of um, I don't know, issues in intimate relationships. Never realized that the root of that was my relationship with my dad. I had one of my suitors tell me, "You need to work on your relationship with your dad." And I thought, well, that has nothing to do with you and me. And it had everything to do with my relationship with my dad. But I was probably in my 40s when that happened. And once he told me that, and I actually intentionally, going back to being that pioneer, went and actually worked on my relationship with my dad, it has done a 180. And honestly, I regret not doing that sooner and not learning that sooner because my dad is now older. And now I'm trying to make up for lost time.
mm,
However, part of why the relationship wasn't great is also his responsibility as well. And so it's not all on me, and you can't take that all on yourself, but you have to be responsible for your part.
that's deep right there. Thank you so much for that question, and thank you for that answer. And then last question we have: how do you move forward when your fiance dies? I don't ever think I will date or love again. It's been 4 years. It's still not getting any easier, and it still hurts.
Thank you for that question. One thing I would suggest to you is I'm going to say this: you're not going to get over it.
Mm,
Please don't let anybody tell you to let go, because that is always going to be a part of you, even when you love again, because you will love again. Um, but I will say this: what I want to suggest to you is take a sheet of paper, draw a horizontal line on it. Put on the left hand side, I wanted you to show where what your dawn of conscious memory of the relationship. That's what the left side starts with. And on the other side of that, on the right hand side, is today. And I want you to actually do a relationship graph. Graph out the things that have happened in that relationship. Ask yourself, what are the things I need to forgive? What are the things I need to, I'm drawing a blank, forgive? Uh, what are the things that I'm grateful for?
mhm,
or some other significant emotional statements? And what are the things that I need to, oh boy, I'm losing it on the last one. But that's a great start. And please reach out to me, and we can talk more about the rest. But it's forgiveness, significant emotional statements, and I know there's some of my clients on here.
I know we're here to support you. I mean, it's funny you said that, or interesting that you said that, because in Viva Life, we talk about forgiving and releasing. We talk about what we're affirming for our lives. What do we want to see? If you don't ever think something's going to happen, it never will happen. So what do you want to see? How do you want to feel in that experience? What are you calling for? Because like you said, you're writing down what were the good things in this relationship. We all know that there was other sides of a relationship that we probably don't remember because we're in this grief stage. What are that? And what of those great things do I want to see happen in my life? As well as lastly, gratitude. Gratitude brings out so much more joy, appreciation, opening up your heart. And that is just so important. So she said, I'm confused. He died. What do I forgive? Ooh, yes. I will be honest with you. I had to forgive my father for dying. I was upset with him for dying until I went back and looked at why did he die. But go ahead, Heather, you go ahead and take that.
I think you started off great, because until you've got to do the relationship graph first before you can actually get into what do you forgive for. Because sometimes we forget all the things that have happened. And the first time you do it, it's not going to come out, but you've got to continue doing that, because grief it is an ongoing thing. It never ends. Something is always going to creep up to remind you of what happened. But you've got to take responsibility and control of what you can control. And again, live out your purpose and have abundant life and joy. I want to end with, my affirmation. Embrace the pain and choose joy.
Embrace the pain and choose joy. Thank you so much with ending with that affirmation, because I think it says so much, especially about the conversation that we had, and probably a lot of the emotions that people have felt surrounding this subject. As we mentioned, grief is not just about death of a person, a physical death, but it is about a person, a thing, an event, something that is no longer occurring, like you said. So please let us know how to get in touch with you. So if we're wanting to, make a difference, make a change, and be able to heal from experiences that have happened to us that cause us grief.
Yes, you can reach me at heather@heatherdhorton.com. And Cheryl's going to put a link in the chat that where you can connect with me, have a heart-to-heart conversation about what's going on and maybe how to move forward. And you can connect with me on LinkedIn.
Love it. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for being here with us. Thank you for opening our aperture about this subject. I definitely learned a lot, and I know that our Viva Lifers and guests have learned a lot too. I'm Dr. Kelly, OMD. You can reach me by, that email that was sent out to you when you registered. There's a lot of information in there, as well as my social media handles, Viva Life Health Hub and Dr. Kelly, OMD. We are so appreciative of each one of you being here, and we know that we can help you through these situations. Just reach out to either one of us. Have a wonderful day, and Viva Life. All right. Thank you for being a part of the Viva Life experience. I'm Dr. Kelly OMD, board certified OBGYN and healthcare executive. If you like what you heard, then please go ahead and like, share, and subscribe. The reason why is because we are trying to educate, encourage, and inspire 1 million people to live their healthiest and wealthiest life. And this is what we're bringing you. We're bringing you educational videos. We're bringing you podcasts. We are bringing you webinars with subject matter experts, including myself, about the topics that affect you the most. So go ahead, like, subscribe, and share. We are everywhere. Have a wonderful day. Viva Life.